Welcome, Hoosier Nation, to the final midweek edition of the Assembly Call hosted by the interns. It was a fun run, but we've still got a lot of fun ahead of us. As always, that's Josh on the other end. I'm Michael. Josh, for the final time, how are we tonight? How are we doing?
We're doing good. And a little bit bummed that it ended the way it did, but, next year is always something to look forward to next year.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot. I mean, we'll talk about this game definitely a little bit. I know you guys are here for the postseason award show. Josh deemed it the kind of the Oscar special, if you will. Nothing quite like Oscar Wednesday around the Big Ten, especially in Bloomington. But we'll get to that in a little bit because Indiana did play a game after we spoke to you last, and it was a ride. You know, it was a 40-minute journey, and honestly, I've never seen a team shoot like North Carolina did on such a stage that game was on. That last Friday. It felt like every single time Marcus Page put up a three, contested or not, whether it was 22, 24, 26 feet, he didn't even hit rim. I mean, he was locked in from the time, from before the opening tip, really. It was just pretty much nothing that Indiana could have done that could have saved their season there. You saw the frustration from Yogi Ferrell as he left the court, kind of flipped his jersey over his head. He was upset and frustrated, which just shows how much of a competitor he is and how much he wanted this and how much it mattered to him. So it was really nice to see how much he cared, as if it weren't obvious already. But that guy ended his career on such a high note, despite the 15-point loss, despite that game pretty much in general. The way he went out this year was something that is almost storybook, just, you know, not quite storybook, I should say, but just the way that this team turned things around. It was – I can look past the outcome of that game because this season was absolutely one to remember. But, Josh, what did you see from that game in particular that kind of left you scratching your head, or, you know, that led you kind of doubt this team in the future going forward, or gave you some optimism going forward?
I mean, just overall, it was just they shot the lights out of the ball. They were 7 for their first 7 from behind the arc. I think that at halftime they were 7 for their first 8. I mean, it was just kind of – They hit every one of their shots. It seemed like, in Indiana was hitting half of their shots. And if it would have evened itself out, it would have been a much more competitive game. But just North Carolina, Marcus Page, I feel like just everybody on that team was hitting their shots consistently, and they were getting good looks, and Bryce Johnson was getting inside, and it just wasn't a good recipe for Indiana in just throughout that entire game. And Indiana had plenty of chances in the second half. It was 11 points at halftime. And then they had chances to get it down to single digits, I think 3 times, any of those times. And once it gets to single digits, when it's a double-digit game and you have a chance to get it into the single digits, that's just a big mindset thing. And Indiana could never really get that mindset of, oh, we're really close to getting back in this game. It's single digits, we're down 9, we're down 8, and they just could never do it. They got down to 10 a couple times, but it was just that couldn't get a stop and then a basket. They just got a stop and then a miss. Then North Carolina would come back with a 5-0 run, and then all of a sudden you're down 15 again. It's just kind of just one of those unlucky games where they were hitting their shots and Indiana just really wasn't.
Yeah, and you can kind of chalk up that not having that killer mentality and trying to cut it to single digits and realizing, oh, wait, we're actually in this game. We got to keep scoring. I think you can credit that because this team never really had to play from behind late in the game. Iowa took the lead on the road, and Purdue chipped back at the lead. And Iowa in Assembly Hall chipped back at the lead, and then that Michigan run happened in the first half, and that Illinois run happened early in the second half. So Indiana was never really down like that at that point in the game with such urgency pretty much all season, with exception to Duke, but we all know how that ended. But I think we can chalk up the way that they couldn't really climb back into that game was just their lack of being down this season. And that really a lot of credit to them in their regular season, but that's just what happened pretty much. And going forward, starting next year, they're going to probably play from behind a lot more often because they've got a younger team, and guys, whoever's going to play point guard, whether it be an incoming freshman or Robert Johnson or even James Blackman, whatever they decide to do, whoever plays point guard, whoever's in charge of running that offense is going to be inexperienced, and they're going to get down early to teams they really shouldn't, and they're going to definitely get down early to teams that are better than them, and there will be teams better than them, but throughout the season, it's going to be a real growing process, despite who's on the team, whether or not Troy Williams leaves, whether or not Thomas Bryant leaves, whoever's there, it's going to be a growing process, and that's for sure. So, there was a lot to learn from this and definitely a lot to move forward from, despite the departures of Bielefeld, Zeisloft, and Yogi. But We'll see how it happens. We'll see how they fix it going forward. But it's definitely going to take a lot of grit out of these new guys if they want to step forward and grow and get past the hump that is the Sweet 16 next year.
Yeah, I feel like that's the goal with this with Tom Crean. I mean, he and the number one seed in Yogi Ferrell's freshman season, they only got to the Sweet 16. So if it's getting over that hump and getting back to where they were in 2002 and all the way back in the 80s and all that, and that's where Indiana basketball wants to get back to, is just kind of it just takes time. Crean has been here for 8 seasons now. I mean, that seems like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, Bob Knight was here for 20+ years. So I mean, that's a long time, and it's still early, and there's still people coming in next year that'll be good. Curtis Jones is going to be a great addition. He could be the point guard starting off next season, and then you got all these returning guys. Everybody's going to be healthy coming into next year. OG's coming back. Thomas Bryant has yet to really say anything yet, but I would probably think he'd come back. Same thing with Troy. So I feel like this team has a bright future. It's just, how do you react to playing without Yogi Ferrell, who has been your leader for the past 4 years? And it's going to be and that's going to be the biggest question mark during this offseason and going into next season.
Yeah, and on that NBA note, it would be just so mind-boggling to me, and I'd be absolutely stunned if Troy Williams can really sit down, look back at this season and say, you know what, I'm ready to throw my name in the NBA hat. Because he's not. I mean, is he a great player? Absolutely. Is his potential as high as almost anyone's in the conference? I would say absolutely. I mean, his athleticism is second to none. He, throughout the year, worked on his three-point shooting, and he got noticeably better throughout the Big Ten conference play. So credit to him there. But, I mean, I cannot get over the turnovers. If you're consistently turning over the ball when you're just trying to drive, and he dribbles it off his knee and off his feet and loses the handle, it feels like at least once every game. And there's absolutely no place for that in the NBA. I'm not here to tell Troy Williams what to do, but from a fan's perspective, and I'm sure I could get a lot of people to agree with me, he's not ready for that stage yet. So we'll see. I mean, obviously there's a lot to look at there, and I'm not inside their family. I'm not inside their close circle. I have no idea what's going on. No one really does, but take this for what it's worth. After the game, the scene in the locker room, I'm not sure if you guys saw it. Thomas Bryant kind of leaning his head on Tom Crean's shoulder, and Crean kind of comforting him, whatever. And I think Zach Osterman tweeted it. He said that they were there for about 5 minutes, didn't move, which 5 minutes is a little weird to be like that for 5 minutes. But it definitely shows how much Thomas Bryant cared about that. He was in tears as he walked off the court. So I think his heart is in Bloomington. And that's kind of contradictory, because the way he played this year and the way he progressed was just unbelievable. He seemed so immature at the start, the very beginning. And then, towards the end and throughout the year, he really, really matured as a player, as a person. His game got better in every aspect. He was confident enough to take open threes. He would dribble drive. He'd be, cleaning the glass like better than anyone on the floor pretty much. But, we'll see, because his heart does seem to be in Indiana. But I think his talent is enough to put him in the draft this year and get drafted. But we'll see how it goes, because there's definitely still some points in his game where he can improve.
Yeah, and Thomas Bryant coming into this year said he was going to stay for 2 years maybe and then move on from there. Now his progression this season was very, very good, and he probably would get drafted high, like you just said. But I just think, going back to what he said before, I just think that kind of weighs heavy on him, and I think that'll eventually keep him here, because I mean, and you just said it, that picture with Tom Crean. I mean, this was a tight knit group. And I think they can carry that into next year. Next year could be something special, even though they are losing Bielfeldt and Farrell. You still got Hartman there. You still got Williams there if he doesn't leave. You still got Robert Johnson, and you still got James Blackman Jr., who was the team's second leading scorer for the first half of the season when he wasn't injured. So, I mean, there's a good group of people coming back, a very good core, and this team is capable of doing some pretty good things next year. But they just got to come here and make sure they're there for next season.
Yeah, and let's hope James Blackman is watching a lot of film on the way that Robert Johnson played defense this year, because Rojo stepped up and filled Blackman's spot and played, compared to Blackman, the best defense I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, Blackman was such a liability defensively, especially at Duke, and that was really highlighted then that people were just going after Crean and like he can't coach defense. His teams can never defend, and a lot of that was on James Blackman. And when you have a leader like that, not the leader, but a leader like that, it's a trickle effect. It trickles down. And guys like Thomas Bryant, who are still learning the college game, they're going to look up to Blackman. And if Blackman's not playing defense, Thomas Bryant's not going to play defense. That's just how it goes. And Yogi can only do so much when you've got another guy like Blackman distracting everyone else. So when he went down, it was obvious to even the casual fan that this team played better defense. So if he can notice that and play better on-ball defense, go under screens instead of trying to chase the guys and get beaten on the dribble drive, he could be so good. And this team could be even better than the one this year, depending on how Curtis Jones and Deron Davis and all these new freshmen come in and what transfer screen gets fit into the system. But I can't sit here and say that this was the year for IU to get back to the Elite Eight, get back to the Final Four. This was not the year. It was a year where it was a shot. We had a shot. It was a long shot, but there was a chance. But going forward, you got guys like OG. Honestly, I did not think he would be as effective at this point right now as he is than if you had asked me 2 months ago. And we were so high on him 2 months ago. After the Minnesota game we did that show, we were losing our minds. We're like, we know he plays 10 minutes a game, but he's going to be incredible. And I can't speak for you, but I certainly did not see him be able to play at this level back then. Did you?
No, definitely not. I mean, this was a player who did not get any playing time early on in the season. I don't think he came off the bench. I don't think he came off the bench for a few of the games early on in the season. And all of a sudden, I don't know which game it was, but I mean that Minnesota game was kind of his first coming out party. Then there was that Michigan State game where he had that huge dunk, and they were like, "Oh, this guy is legit." And then Crean eventually was like, "Yeah, we treat this guy like he's an upperclassman. This guy has earned respect." But no, I definitely did not see it coming from him after the first couple games because he just didn't play. He didn't play all that often. It was kind of a shorter bench, but Crean all season said we want to develop depth on this team. We want to go too deep, and that was basically what they did throughout the entire season. And they got to that point even without James Blackman Jr. They had a pretty deep bench. Harrison Ego even got in on that. So I think what Crean was talking about with depth early on paid off in the end. And I mean, a Sweet 16 run is nothing to shake your head at. That's a solid season for a team that got a 5 seed. I mean, who knows? I'm not going to go back into that seeding thing, but I think a Sweet 16 is something to hang your hat on. And Farrell wanted a championship, but I mean, run into a team like North Carolina, that was just kind of a buzzsaw.
Yeah, it was just, again, Carolina was too much, but obviously this season was just so special. It will be one I remember for the rest of my life. This was our freshman year at IU, and we got exposed to all this. We didn't see a single loss in person. I did. I was at Duke, but at home we didn't see a single loss. It was for the men and the women. It was absolutely incredible. We saw this team grow before our eyes, which is always a pleasure to watch. We saw who's going to be a phenom in OG. You saw the legend of Yogi Ferrell come to an end. The whole season was absolutely spectacular, and no matter who stays and who goes after this year, I can't wait to see what happens next year. But before next year happens, we got to look back at some of our favorite moments from this year, Josh. We got to do it. It's a great plan, a great idea that you came up with. All the credit in the world to you. Our Oscar Wednesday, if you will, for IU basketball, and we've got it broken down into categories. And again, tweet at us if you have anything to say, anything to ask. This will probably be the last time you see us this season. So if you have anything, shoot us a tweet, email, text, whatever. If you got our information, you've got us on hand. We're paying attention. Shoot us whatever you got. Tell if you agree, disagree, any questions, whatever. But we're going to dive right into our Oscar Wednesday special. I can't believe I keep saying that, but it's got to be a new thing now. Oscar Wednesday. So, Josh, our first category is the best game this year. Keep in mind, this is strictly IU. So the best game that the Hoosiers played this year was blank.
For my best game this year, I got to go with that Notre Dame game all the way back in December at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. They were down 16. They came all the way back in the last 10 minutes of the game and won that game. And that was the game that really turned this season around. Without that game, I don't think anything else for the rest of the season happens the way it does, because that was such a turning point in the season. And there were some other very good games. I mean, we listed down Purdue, we listed down at Iowa, at Michigan, the Iowa game at Assembly Hall, and then this Notre Dame game. But of all those 5 games, I think that Notre Dame game just kind of made this Hoosier team believe that they could get back into this thing, and that they weren't done after that Maui stretch and after that Duke stretch, that this was a legit team. And I think that was the game that kind of opened the floodgates for this basketball team for the rest of the season. And I think we saw that when it came down to it.
Yeah, that was absolutely the game that kind of broke the season open for Indiana, because there were so many question marks and head scratchers after that Duke game, and this was just 2.5 weeks later, and we see them down. I don't remember the exact score, but they were down double digits in the second half, and they just captained this comeback. They were like, enough of this. We're gonna take this lead. We're gonna win this game, and that they did exactly that. So that was the turning point of the year, no doubt. But for me, the game of the year was the road game against Iowa, where the Big Ten tournament was clinched. Or I'm sorry, the Big Ten title, the Big Ten regular season title. The Big Ten tournament was not clinched for the Hoosiers, as we all know that. The Big Ten regular season conference title in Iowa City, because that game there was so much hype going into it around Bloomington. Just to win the Big Ten outright with another game to play after that was absolutely remarkable. And Iowa, with the great talent that they had, and to go into that arena, that environment, and take a big lead early and outplay them, and then let them come back into the game. Iowa outplayed Indiana for a decent portion midway to late through in the second half to take that lead at a crucial point in the game. But the leadership, the guts, and the grit of Yogi Ferrell stepped up, and he hit a huge shot to clinch the game. They had a couple defensive mishaps at the end that gave Iowa a chance, but not really more than a chance at even tying the game and sending it into maybe overtime. But that game was it was a 40-minute battle. No team was ever out of it. It was back and forth. It was great, and the Hoosiers won the Big Ten title 40 minutes after that game started. So that's got to be my game of the year.
Yeah, and I'm not going to argue with that, because that was one of my favorite games to watch all year. But kind of the point I made was just like that would not have happened without Notre Dame. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But Iowa is I couldn't agree with you more on that as well. So next category, we're moving on to best moment. We picked out four moments from this season. First one, winning the Big Ten outright. So that was the at Iowa game. Yogi's record-breaking assist on a great pass from, I think it was outside the three-point line, just threw a bullet inside to Max Bielfeldt, who laid it in. I think that was against Illinois. And they got senior day against Maryland. I mean, that was just a great culmination of the entire season at Assembly Hall. And then that Notre Dame comeback, one of the best moments of the season. So, Michael, what is your best moment of the season?
I mean, it seems like such a perfect transition. I'd like to change it up, but it's got to be winning the Big Ten title outright. I mean, as you all probably know, I grew up just north of Evanston, which is where the Northwestern Wildcats are. I didn't see anything close to a Big Ten title for 18 years. And here I am, my freshman year at college, and my team's winning it all in front of my eyes my first year. So it was awesome to see, and it really felt like this team was capable of it about midway through the Big Ten portion of their schedule. Wiping the Duke game from memory, just the way they played there, I was like, at home, this team cannot lose. They simply cannot lose. And the one game that scares me is Purdue. And they outplayed Purdue for 38 of the 40 minutes. The Purdue guards hit a couple threes to get them back into it, but that game was pretty much over from the start. And I'm like, this team is special. This team will win the Big Ten in the regular season. I don't know about the Big Ten tournament, but this team will go far, and this team will accomplish something that other teams in the past have not. And they did make it to the Sweet 16. They didn't get through, but they won the Big Ten title. And just that night, being in Assembly Hall, watching it on the Jumbotron, there was an Assembly Hall watch party, and they streamed the game, and it was so much fun to be with, just a bunch of IU fans going crazy at a Jumbotron that is really just a large television. And it's not like it was an actual game going on in front of us. It was on TV, but it felt like the atmosphere just made it feel like that you were really there and that the game was really happening in front of your eyes in real life, not just on a screen. So that night, being in Assembly Hall for that and sharing that moment with everyone around me and then walking around for the next couple of weeks as Big Ten champs, it felt absolutely incredible. Nothing really in my sports life has culminated to that really in watching sports. So it was unbelievable, and I thought they'd go further than they did in the tournament, but hey, winning the Big Ten tournament, winning the Big Ten championship outright in the regular season, is nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it's the complete opposite, no matter who you are.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, winning that night was just awesome. I mean, just walking around the next day, everybody seemed happy, and it was just like it was fun to be an Indiana basketball fan. But I got to go back to that Notre Dame comeback as my best moment of the season, because I just laid it out in that last category. Without that, I don't think any of the rest of the season happens the way it does, because that was just such a turning point in the season. They instilled some confidence in themselves. They went into the Big Ten not in the Big Ten tournament, catching whatever you have over there. Going into the Big Ten schedule, and they just had that confidence, that swagger about them. Tom Crean, just something turned with that team on that day, on that afternoon in Indianapolis, and in an arena that really hasn't been too kind to the Hoosiers in the past with the Big Ten tournament, with some other Crossroads Classic games in the past. They kind of found something that just wasn't there earlier in the season, earlier in Tom Crean's era here at IU at that stadium, and it just something turned on that day, and it just kind of flipped a switch with his team. And without that, I don't think anything else this season happens the way it does.
Absolutely. That was, like I said, absolutely the turning point of the year, and no one can deny that. That's where this team really, really took a step forward. Let's go more in depth, and let's talk about the best breakout player for this year. We could come up with three nominees: the obvious OG Anunoby, and the two transfers, Nick Zeisloft, who wasn't that much of a standout at Illinois State, and Bielefeld, who never really got that much of a chance wearing maize and blue in Ann Arbor for the Wolverines. So, Josh, who'd you have winning this one?
I mean, this was a really tough choice because all three of these guys were kind of under the radar coming into this season. But I got to go with Max Bielefeld. Just think of this team without Max Bielefeld. I mean, there's no really frontline depth on this team without Max Bielefeld. You don't have that perimeter threat that, I mean, we didn't really know he could have coming into this season. And he was just kind of that glue guy for this team. I mean, he stepped up when he needed him to. In that Rutgers game early on in the season, 18 points, 14 rebounds, I believe off the top of my head. I mean, that was a game that Indiana probably would have struggled with because that was their first game without James Blackman. They were just kind of finding out some things coming off that Notre Dame game just 2 games before. And that was their first game on the road in the Big Ten, and Max Bielefeld stepped up in a huge way. He stepped up in a huge way in some other games down the stretch. And just without him, I don't think this season is where it is, because he was just such an influential player on the court and off the court, because he was one of those senior leaders with Yogi Ferrell and with Nick Zeisloft that were just kind of in the younger guys' ears saying, this is what you need to do. And he's been through the Big Ten before. And just without Max Bielefeld, I don't think they are where they ended up. And he had quite a season this year. He kind of changed his game a little bit with that 3-point shot that he developed. And he's my breakout player of the year.
It's tough to disagree with you there, because picture Bielefeld not being on this team. Who's going to play instead of him? I can't think of anyone. His game is so unique, and the way he played, it can't be duplicated with anyone on Indiana's roster, and that's a fact. You can't argue that. That's not debatable. And he, with his presence, just him being on the team, he made Indiana capable of going like 9 deep on the roster when fully healthy, 8-9 deep. And without him, I don't know where this team would have been going forward after Blackman went down, and even when Robert Johnson couldn't play with that ankle. So it's so hard to disagree with you there, but I've got to say OG. And this is not to hate on Nick Zeisloft, because to me it was really between Zeisloft and Bielefeld more than OG. But then I thought about it a little more. You think at Zeisloft, and he gets these runs going for Indiana. If they're on a cold streak, you get him open for a split second. He's knocking down a 3. Crowd's going crazy again. Indiana gets a stop. Someone gets a bucket. 5-point swing back in the game. It was always Zeisloft who started those runs. But OG just turned, OG just turned way too many heads this year for me to not pick him. And he's going to be special. There's no doubt about that. The sky right now is the limit for him. Obviously things could change when he goes in and plays 25 minutes a game instead of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we don't know what he's capable of for playing 25 minutes, because he does provide a great spark off the bench. But proceed with caution with OG. Don't go thinking he's the next Oladipo next year. Don't go thinking he's going to be breaking records next year, because he's not. He could be outstanding. He could be this team's best player. But at the same time, you never know. And when you throw guys into the starting lineup, anything can happen. But for right now, this kid went under the radar recruiting. No one noticed him out of Jefferson City, Missouri. Tom Crean and the staff did. He didn't really play in the non-conference portion of the schedule. He did in the Big Ten play, and he turned a lot of heads, especially in the NCAA tournament. OG is this team's breakout player, along with Bielefeld. It's tough to split them up. No doubt about it, and he will be special going forward.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that one because he was just such a special player this year. I mean, he was. I mean, you said it, he was under recruited, and then he comes into IU, and he's this phenomenon. Basically, I mean, all the kids on campus love him. I feel like he's just a great, just kind of a. He's kind of just a mellow guy, and he just kind of does his own thing. But when he gets on the court, he is pretty fun to watch. And moving on to our next category, our best celebration. This is kind of a fun one right here. We got the Tim Priller dab. I don't know if many of you saw this because it kind of went unnoticed, but on Twitter there was a big thing with Tim Priller and a couple other guys on the bench doing a little like you did like a little dab like that on the bench after a made free throw against Purdue. Yes, I just dabbed on this show. Second up, we have Thomas Bryant touchdown at midcourt after the Iowa game. I don't know. There was a picture that I think somebody from the USA Today took of the entire team celebrating at Iowa after the game at midcourt, and then Thomas Bryant was on the ground by himself, kind of just having a moment to himself. It was a really, really cool picture. That was a really fun moment. Another fun moment at Iowa was the locker room celebration when they all waited for Tom Crean to come in there, and they all were spraying water all over the place, and that was really fun. But the last one, Doc Libby, which is Yogi Ferrell's mom and Yogi's sisters, doing their dabs after Yogi's made free throws and made shots and all that during the tournament and throughout the season. Those were all great celebrations from this season. But I think that locker room celebration at Iowa was, I think, just one of the best moments of the entire season. Kind of not on the court, but off the court, because that was just so cool to see them all come together like that after they accomplished such what seemed like an impossible goal early on in the season, to see that come to fruition and see them do that. And it was just kind of a chilling moment there for IU. And that was my celebration of the season. Just really cool moment right there.
And for those of you that have not seen the Tim Priller dab, you have to see Tim Priller dab. Josh and I both retweeted it. I think I actually quoted Josh's tweet. So if you just go to my timeline, my Twitter handle's right there. Give me a follow. Josh is even lower than that. Give him a follow too. We both have tweeted about it in the past 3-4 hours. So go check it out. It's absolutely worth your 5 seconds of time. You will not waste it. It's well spent. But I'm going to tease you a little bit because that's not my favorite celebration. The best celebration is Doc Libby and the Yogi sisters. It's got to be. I mean, they had a national kind of story before that UNC game on CBS. How can I not give it to them? They had the shirts. They had the 3-arrow that Yogi loves to do. And that's my favorite celebration in the game right now. It's better than the dab. It's better than the running man. It's better than it all is the 3-arrow. Absolutely. It's got to be Doc Libby and Yogi's sisters. It's got to be. They turned too many heads. It was so fun. You could see them in Assembly Hall going crazy. They're the greatest fans in Bloomington. No doubt about that. And they will be missed next year along with their fellow point guard over there in the Farrell household. But they definitely were a highlight to this season, the highlight of all highlights, if you will. It was always a pleasure watching them just love the game and dive into it, and it was infectious, and it was tough not to get as into it as them.
No doubt about that. I mean, they were so into the game, and when we had a chance to meet Doc Libby when we had that meetup after the Minnesota game, and that was just a really fun to interact with her and just kind of talk with her about Yogi's past and kind of what's going on now, and it was really cool to kind of pick her brain a little bit. But our next category, we're going to move on here. Best Senior Day speech. Michael, I'm going to let you take this one first.
I don't want to say too much about this one because it was kind of a slippery slope, but I think the Yogi speech, it hit a home run. It rounded all the bases. It was perfect. I mean, he opened it up kind of lightheartedly. He's like, oh yeah, I know this is going to be long, blah blah blah. And then he got serious, and then he really thanked his family, and you could tell how thankful he was for everyone involved. His mom, his dad, who traveled to almost every single game, home or away. His sisters, Coach Crean for giving him the chance to start his freshman year. Just he was so thankful, and you could tell that he was really grateful for everything that he received from his recruitment process until that speech, and then obviously he couldn't speak for what was in the future, but even going up to that UNC game and when they were eliminated. So, and he even had a little humor in there when he brought up his girlfriend. If you haven't seen the clip, it's not hard to find. It's very funny. He was fantastic. Brought the girlfriend up there, gave her some props too. He really thanked everyone top to bottom and everyone in between. So it was the Yogi speech for me because it was long, but I couldn't stop listening because he had such good composure up there. He was into it. It wasn't cliche. He was truly grateful, and you could tell. So, I mean, he had Assembly Hall on their feet after that game, or after that speech. And by the way, everyone stayed for that, even though it was an hour after the game ended. Everyone stayed. I didn't really see anyone in the Assembly Hall leave to give Yogi the send off he deserved.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great speech, just all around. I mean, it was long, like you said, but he deserved every second that he got for that speech, and it was great. But the guy who went before him kind of went under the radar, I feel like, and that was Nick Zeisloft. He went in depth on that quote that we don't play at Indiana, we play for Indiana, and that kind of sparked something for the rest of the season. Now, granted they only played, I believe, 4 more games after that. After the Big Ten tournament, then those 3 tournament games, but that just got a whole movement going on Twitter. There was the hashtag for Indiana, and I think that really sparked something just kind of with me and just there were a lot of fans that was just such a cool moment that Indiana is more than just a college. This is a full on. I mean, this is just kind of a way of life almost. It's bigger than just basketball in the state. And playing for Indiana just means so much more than playing at Indiana. And I think that just was a really, really cool speech from a guy who kind of went under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, and it actually shed some light on, how Crean reacted to that Duke game, because he did say it was in the locker room after Duke, and he said everyone took it really, really to heart, and the mood was very tense, and no one was saying a word. And he basically said Crean came in and just went off. And he basically said, you guys are, you're not playing. You play at Indiana. You're not playing for Indiana. Pretty much saying they don't care. You can find these speeches online. I'm not going to summarize it for you. Go find it. Watch everyone. I guarantee you they're all worth it. From Yogi down to Ryan Burton, they're all worth it. Just please do it. It's worth your time. Trust me. As well as the Priller Dab. Don't forget that. That's on our Twitter. And the final one is the best play of the year. And we had this down to 3. We had the Troy Williams dunk against Purdue, which, if you can't think of which Troy Williams dunk this season, there were about 500,000 of them. Pretty much any Troy Williams dunk could have made this list, but the one against Purdue was sensational. The OG dunk at Michigan State, which was mind-blowing. The kid jumped out of the gym, tried to touch the ceiling, and I can't remember who he threw it down on. Maybe it was Costello. I can't quite remember. But that was ridiculous. And, of course, the Yogi shot at Iowa. Josh, we couldn't disagree on this. As great as the 2 dunks were, we had to go with that Yogi shot at Iowa. Why?
Because that was just such a staple of this season that just kind of culminated it all. It was such a dagger for Iowa there, and it was just such a cool moment for Yogi Ferrell. I mean, he was the leader of this team. He was playing his last Big Ten road game. He was trying to get that Big Ten title that he desperately wanted this season, and that was just the shot to do it right there. And it was just an awesome shot. It was just kind of him. He was isolated late in the shot clock. He was just like, okay, I got to take this in my own hands and do it myself, and he did it. I mean, that was just one of those clutch shots that we'll remember for a long time. It wasn't as big as the Watt shot probably just because that was just insane. It may not have been as big as Keith Smart to win the championship, but it's got to be right up there because that shot, it was just a dagger, won the championship. It was a championship winning moment right there, and I don't know how you can go against that.
Yeah, I know everything you said right there is money, right on point. He stepped up. He didn't have to make that shot. I forget who tweeted this. I can't steal it from him because it's such a good line. I can't remember who tweeted it. Whoever you are, props. It was a great line, but Yogi Ferrell, he basically said that Yogi did not have to make that shot to cement his legacy at Indiana, but he did anyway. He didn't have to take it. He didn't have to make it, but he did both. He walked up, contested deep 3 to seal the game. The shot did not have to be attempted, but he did it anyway because he knew he could, and he knew it could fall. He knew it would win them the game and the Big Ten and momentum going forward. So I mean, that just Assembly Hall, like I said when we were watching it, the watch party erupted. I mean, people were high-fiving each other. The guy next to me actually gave me a hug. This older guy who graduated from IU decades and decades ago. He was sitting next to me. We were talking the whole time. It was kind of like a stranger hug, a stranger moment. He jumped up and we high-fived, and he gave me a little bro embrace, whatever. But there was just such a sense of, we did it. We did it. And it was Yogi. The spotlight was on Yogi. Once all the celebration was done, we look up at the Jumbotron, and there was Yogi giving that stink face with the 3-arrow. And, that was just a moment that really kind of defined this season as a whole. And it's something that people who followed this team this year will never forget. Absolutely. It resonates more than the Troy Williams dunk. It resonates more than the OG dunk, and even the one against Chattanooga that everyone kind of blew up over. But that shot right there, just it's cemented really in IU history for the next couple years, definitely. I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing the replay of that on the starting lineup video on the Jumbotron next year and all my years to come.
Yeah, I mean, that was just one of those defining moments, and we didn't talk about this earlier because we didn't really make a category for this because I think it just kind of blatant who it is. But the MVP for the season, correct me if I'm wrong, it's got to be Yogi Ferrell. I mean, he was the heart and soul of this team the entire season. He was the leader. He wanted a championship so bad. He got a Big Ten championship. That's nothing to shake your head at. I mean, that's an incredible accomplishment to bookend your career with 2 Big Ten championships. They didn't get that 6th banner, but they still were very successful this season. That's nothing to hang your hat on. And Yogi Ferrell was the glue for this team. I said Max Bielfeldt was, but even more. Yogi Ferrell was the super glue for this team. I mean, he was just above and beyond. He was a good leader. He was a good player. I mean, he did everything for this team, and he was definitely the MVP for this team. He deserves every award he gets. He was just named to the Wooden Final 10 list or whatever they do now for that, and he just deserves it all.
He really does. And every award that he's nominated for, he deserves at least recognition. So words can't really describe what he's done for this program and how much he meant to Bloomington and the tradition and IU basketball as a whole. So, you'll understand if you followed this team for 1 year, for 4 years, or for 40. You'll understand what he meant to this team. And if you even follow Big Ten basketball, to appreciate and to respect Yogi. And he's just one of those guys that you're not going to come across you're not going to come across a lot of them probably ever again. They will come across every now and then just because, these leaders that start for 4 years, no way. Absolutely not. That's unheard of. There's just no way that a guy at a big-time program like Indiana, I mean, you throw it against any program out there, any Tier 1 to Tier 2 program, there's no way a guy's going to stay 4 years and start on a successful team. There's just no way. He's going to leave for the NBA. But Yogi did it. He came to get his degree. He came because he loved Indiana. He just couldn't leave this program, what Kareem's done for him. So just what he did for this program, I just can't even put it into words. Josh can't put it into words. No one can put it into words. So we're just going to leave it at that. If you follow the program, you know what he's done. So that's the last IU we're going to talk for the season. But before we go and wrap up the season as a whole, we got to get Final Four predictions. And despite my rant about Syracuse, here they sit in the Final Four out to prove me wrong, playing the Tar Heels of North Carolina, a fellow ACC opponent. Now, I don't take back my original claim that they shouldn't be in the tournament because, what they did after they got placed in the tournament does not count for what they did before they got placed in the tournament. But that's a whole separate conversation I will never have again. Josh, Villanova, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Syracuse. Who wins, and then who meets in the championship, and who wins that and why?
I got Oklahoma over Villanova just because of Buddy Hield. I think they played this season in Hawaii. It was a sweaty gym with no AC. And in Hawaii, you don't want to play in a gym with no AC, I don't think. And Oklahoma won by about 23. And I just think they're just a superior team than Villanova. I mean, Villanova had some great wins on their way. They killed Iowa. That was a great win for them. They dismantled Miami, and then they won a really, really good game against Kansas. That was just a great Elite Eight game, just an all-time tournament game right there. And now they meet Oklahoma, but I just think Oklahoma is just a little bit better than them. They have a couple more playmakers, and I think they're going to get the win. On the other side, North Carolina, Syracuse. These teams have met a couple times this season. North Carolina, I don't remember how their season series went, but nonetheless, North Carolina is playing great right now, and it doesn't matter how they were playing 3 months ago. It matters how you're playing on April 2nd, and I got North Carolina in that one. They're just a far more superior team than Syracuse, even with that 2-3 zone. North Carolina just has too many playmakers, especially if they're hitting their threes like they did last Friday. And then the championship, Oklahoma, North Carolina, that's a great game. Probably two of the best teams, or I think the two best teams in the entire country when it comes down to it. But I got Oklahoma. I just think Buddy Hield, big-time player in a big-time game, is going to make big-time plays, and that's just what it's going to come down to, and the Sooners are going to cut down those nets in Houston.
First of all, let me just say I hope that is the national championship, because that would be maybe last year, but I can't think of another national championship that was so just star-studded and that's going to be just a showcase of the best of best, the best of the best of college basketball. Maybe Memphis, Kansas way back when. Butler did not really show when they made those two runs the best of college basketball. You know, even though it was against Duke and John Shire and UConn and Kemba. But I hope and pray that that's the national championship, and I think it will be. I think, you mentioned it earlier, Syracuse, North Carolina in the regular season. North Carolina won both matchups, but only by 11 on the road and 5 at home. So they didn't really dominate Syracuse by any means of the word. And Syracuse, again, with that zone that Indiana knows all too well back to 2013 in the tournament, with that zone, they can suffocate you. And North Carolina does like to get it through the free throw line, and that's how you attack the zone. So this game could blow up early in favor of North Carolina, or it could be a low-scoring battle for the entire 40 minutes. And who knows? It's impossible to predict what will happen, but I think North Carolina just has enough weapons to get it done. They're not as deep as is ideal, but they've got enough guys in that starting lineup and even off the bench to get them this win. Because all in all, Syracuse is not Oklahoma. Syracuse is not Villanova. Syracuse isn't even Notre Dame. Syracuse isn't Indiana. And UNC beat all those guys. But on the other half, I think that's going to be a tough matchup. I think Oklahoma's going to win. I would not be stunned in any way if Villanova were to win. If I were Ken Pom here and you asked me what percentage chance I'd give Oklahoma, I'd probably say like 53, 54. I think Arcidiacono, Ochefu, Jenkins, Brunson, those guys can all bring a lot to the table for Villanova, and Arcidiacono is cold-blooded from beyond the arc. And if Oklahoma doesn't know that, they're about to learn. And Buddy's got to take over. He's got to take over. He's got to drop 27, 28 if they want to be in this game, because Villanova's got too many weapons. I'm taking Oklahoma by 2. And I actually do think if they win that game, they beat North Carolina in the national championship. I think just the story of Buddy and the legend of Buddy Hield takes it all the way, and I think they win. I really, really do. So I can't believe we just agreed on that completely, but we sure did. That's something that we couldn't really agree on anything else this year, except for, here it is, you thought it wasn't coming, a Rutgers reference. The only other thing we could agree on is Corey Big Time Sanders, and that Rutgers would get that one-time Big Ten win. Sorry, Josh, I had to do it. We went every show mentioning Rutgers. We couldn't stop now. We went the whole year. We did it. I can hang my hat on that and be proud.
No, that is definitely something to hang your hat on. And if we do get that matchup on Monday night of North Carolina and Oklahoma, that's going to be a great way to just finish off this season. Hopefully we'll get one shining moment in that game, but then that's the best part of the entire tournament. At the very end, I mean, not that to the end of the tournament, but that one shining moment video is just the best way to end the college basketball season ever. And that's, I think, do you have anything else to add? I mean, the last thing we had to do is just say thank you to everybody who has tuned in and week out. It's been a pleasure from our dorm rooms. I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago, from your house in Chicago. It's been a pleasure bringing you our thoughts on IU basketball all season long. Thank you to Jared, Andy, Will. It's been incredible this entire season. And anything else to add there, Michael?
No, we can't thank everyone enough. Jared, Andy, Will, Ryan, all those guys. pretty much everyone that can make this possible, everyone that's listened to us, everyone that's on that email list. And if you're not, get on it right now. Don't listen to me ramble. Josh just said everything I'm about to say. So go get on that email list. Go to subscribe on the Assembly Call page and get on that. You will be one of many. Trust me, it is well worth it. You get content that you can't get anywhere else. But again, in a serious note, thank you to everyone that's paid attention to us, that's sent in their questions on Twitter, that's voiced their opinion, that's tuned in week and week out, that's tuned in once. If you're listening right now, if you're listening 2 months from right now, thank you for making this possible. And, we gave it a shot the first week, and Jared told us to keep going because the numbers were so good. And they've been climbing every week, so we've got no one to thank but you guys for that, for giving us a chance to do this. It was a ton of fun, an absolutely great experience. Thanks to Jared again for letting us do it. But that's about all I got. Just thank you to everyone that made this possible.
Yeah, I don't think we can say thank you enough, because without you guys tuning in, this show probably doesn't happen the way it does. But I think that's all we got. So for Michael on the other end, I'm Josh. I guess we will see what IU basketball has in store. There'll be plenty of content from the website during the off season. We'll keep you updated with the draft. If there's any big news, I'm sure Jared and all of them will have a couple of shows once it gets closer to the season again. But in the off season, definitely stay tuned on the website for any IU basketball news. But for Michael on the other end, I'm Josh. See you later.